Episode 110 of Vertical Pursuit. Pastor Tatlock, how are you?
Doing good, dude. 110. Holy cow.
I know. I want you to talk about a couple things. Oh, by the way, you know what I did yesterday?
Huh.
I get up in the morning and I go out. This is not a parable and has no teaching application at all. But I go out in my garage and this is my garage. And I go out there and there's I can hear bees. I can hear a couple bees. I'm like, all right, no big deal. Once in a while you get bees in the garage.
Yeah.
This was the morning, but they're flying kind of weird, which they do in the mornings. And then I'm like,
it's like a bee hangover.
Yeah. Well, I knocked those two bees down and then, and they're okay. They're not even mad at me. And then I start walking toward the door, I look over and on the floor, there's 50 dead bees.
What?
Yeah. And I'm like, what in the world? And then I look on my garage door. And under the windows across the garage door, there's that little shelf kind of, just a seam in the door. And there's 75. And they're kind of walking around. They're not dead. So I do what anybody does in this time. I take a picture and I send it to Grok and I go, what are these? What's going on?
Yeah.
Tell me about this. And Grok just immediately that's this bee and this is what they're doing. And of course Grok knows it's morning. Here's the temperature where you're at. This is why they're doing this.
Are they dormant?
No, I guess
dead?
in the morning they're kind of, no, the ones on the floor were dead, but the ones on the windowsill and so I'm like, I'm not sure what to do. So I call we call the guy who's our exterminator and they said, well, with bees like that, with bees, not hornets, not wasps or whatever, you need to call a bee guy. And so I called a bee guy this is what they do. And he goes, no big deal. He goes, this is what they do. And this time of year, they get into, they call them swarms. And the way he kind of said it's kind of like a gang. And they scout. And he said, somewhere they're coming into your garage. So anyway, I figured out where they're coming in. But he said, I just shot back those up. No biggie. And I said, well, I've been told that, do I have to have somebody come pick them up or do something? He said, no. So then I go up and I've got a natural gas pipe that was put in after the house was built for the backyard, like the fireplace and the heaters. And so anyway, that was kind of cut sloppy. There's a bigger hole than the pipe is.
That's where they're coming in.
That's where they're coming in. So I look up there and sure enough, there's a couple up there. So I pack that with some steel wool. On the other side of that wall is kind of right back by my backyard. So I start doing stuff. I'm not thinking. Then I keep hearing more and more. So then it starts getting hotter. It was hot yesterday. So as soon as it starts warming up, they get really active and they kind of get pissed. And so then I'm looking around. I'm like, whoa, I go around the side of the house. There's more. And so I don't think much of it. I go do some more stuff. Then now it's 11, 12 o'clock. It's really warm. I go around the side. I got to show you a picture. Not that it's going to do anybody any good. I go around the side of the house. That's what I see.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Dude,
it looks like a football of just bees.
Holy cow.
Yeah. So what's really funny is, and it talked about how they give off, so bees are interesting anyway, how they give off this pheromone if they, and it spreads, they communicate with each other. So then one of them gets in my face and there's a couple other ones. So I duck out of there. Then I come back and they remember me. So then they're really ticked off. So then I'm like, okay, I declare a jihad at that point. I'm like,
Did you bring the fire?
Oh, I brought the fire. Yeah. So then I went, I have one of those, those, you put this little can of propane on. And then
with the torch?
I went nuts with this
Did
torch.
you really?
Yeah. I'm like, all right, you guys drew first blood. I didn't. I was trying to handle this the right way. It's trying to be good.
Anyway, had this all on video.
So all day yesterday, I'm literally at war with these bees, and finally I know there's things you're supposed to do with the queen, but she was in the wall, I assume, because they're all going in the wall. If I could have done it another way, don't get mad at me. I know.
Yeah, you're gonna have the bee lovers.
I know.
Now.
I know.
You just set off the.
I know
the whole.
I know you're supposed to do in a certain way, and I just couldn't. I didn't.
The planet now is destroyed because you did that.
I know, and I didn't because they're pollinators. I get it.
They're important. God created them to do that.
I know,
and also they're a pain in the butt.
I did call the guy. I went about it the right way. and then it just got out of hand, and I just had to stop this thing.
You had to defend your house, man.
I had to defend the house. I circled the wagons and declared jihad, and we had it out.
Do a little victory lap around the house.
So this morning I went out there, and by the way, there was a lot of them that had dropped, and a lot of them took off, and which is fine, get out of here. But they're interesting things. I know. They're
pretty amazing. Bees are an
incredible.
Amazing creation of God. I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we had a pretty good war yesterday. But anyway, that doesn't have any. I've forgotten to tell you that. I'll show you a few other photos.
Man versus wild.
Yeah, I'll show you a few other photos of just of the post battle carnage. And so I went out there this morning and
stacking bodies.
Yeah, there were a couple around, and they're like, I mean, hey guys, this can go one of two ways. You saw what happened yesterday, right?
Fire warning shots out.
Yeah, I'm like, you look around. I mean, you can see this didn't end well yesterday, so don't start again today. And there's a couple of them looking at me, and coming down, checking me out. I'm like, hey, I put my hands up.
You should just leave the dead ones there. It's just like
I did,
just like a reminder.
Yeah, I did. Kind of like in the old days when they would hang pirate skeletons in the cove as a warning. Ye be warned. And so I was going to do that, but I figured, well, they got to see that. But then I talked to the guy on the phone, and he said, you're overthinking this a little bit. These are not intelligent creatures. They're driven by instinct. But anyway, so I apologize to the bee people for what happened yesterday. I feel really bad about it.
I thought something was off in the the ecosystem of the world.
Yeah.
I felt something in my senses yesterday.
Yeah.
That little battle you had.
Yeah. Well, and the guy said when I talked to him on the phone, he said what they're doing is, he said, yes, there's a queen. And he said they likely just came in there, because I was out there the night before and there was nothing.
Right.
And he said, well, the queen has to start raising new queens. This is the time of year that they do it. And if they don't do it now, that little hive or that swarm, they'll miss the opportunity to plant a new queen, which I don't even know how that works, but it's very
And I know sometimes a bee person, that's probably a technical word for them, they come out and relocate that.
Yes,
they'll grab that queen and take it back to, they do all that kind of stuff.
And if she'd have been in a position where that could have been accomplished, and I asked the guy, offered, and he said, no.
You did more than most people would do.
I tried.
Most people will be like, I'm going down to Ace Hardware, grab some raid, and I'm going after this.
Eventually, I might have done that. So I'm honest, and being a truth teller, we could have gotten to that point yesterday, just so everybody knows. I don't want to implicate myself, but we did get to a point where firepower was up, was raised. Only when I had a couple coming at me in my face, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I fired a warning shot, and nobody seemed to heed that.
Yep.
There was no respect given.
Yep.
I gave it early on. I called on behalf of the colony,
but it's your job to protect your home. Exactly. That's your job. We have very few assignments as men around the house, and one of them is protect from the wild beasts that are out there. Yeah.
So it didn't end well. I'm sorry to say. I would have loved, because when I went on AI and I'm talking about it, and it's like, well, the best way to do this is you take out some water and then warm water and sugar, and you put them in there and they revive that. I'm like, I love that idea. I love the idea. I don't have the time. I'm busy. I'm doing other stuff. I'd love to go rehabilitate all of these bees and take them, drive them 180 miles somewhere and start a colony. I just don't have the time. I'm sorry. But anyway, so that's that. Before we move to our topic today, I want to hit a couple more things. Well, number one, and I just thought of this, but when I did that yesterday, the cool thing about, and I know AI is scary. It is. But when I did that, Grok literally said, when I asked it about what's going on, it says, take a picture. So I take a picture and it says, oh, that's this bee and this is how they act and this is what they do. I know where you're at. I know what time it is. I know what temperature it is. Try this. And then it says, I say, well, I can't tell if they're dead. They're kind of walking around slow. And Grok says, hey, shoot me a little video.
No, you're kidding.
So I shoot a video and I send that and it goes, okay, this is the behavior. These two with their heads together because they're kind of together. And he goes, they're communicating. I'm like, really? So anyway, then I kind of start getting down this AI thing, and maybe because I was talking about it yesterday and my phone was listening to me, which we know it does. I got on a couple of interviews about, and we've done a podcast. Well, and it's out of date now. Anything you do on AI outside of a week is out of date.
Yeah.
And I heard a guy say, that everything that's been accomplished in AI the last 10 years will be tripled in the next 3 weeks to a month.
Absolutely.
It's starting to go, they call it a hockey stick. It's starting to go up to where it's going fast. Everything. I mean, even from when, like I said, even from when we talked about it in the previous episode, we're light years beyond that now with what's being done. And I know it's scary, but this guy was talking about, he said with college kids, one of the jobs they would always put kids into are majors. They'd say, if you want to have a job for the future, man, go into coding. And then now they're coding themselves.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So those kids are graduating now.
Oh, yeah.
And they're like,
you're
no,
obsolete now.
That job's
gone. Sorry.
Gone. And it's going to do that with so many jobs. So if you're young, I don't know what to tell kids. I really don't, because you start the creatives, the creative gifts.
Yeah.
That it can be replicated, I'm sure, through AI, but you'd think maybe that is an area
it's wild right now. Relevant Magazine just posted, they do a thing every day on their social media, and they posted an article about synth music, and it's called something, and the younger generation would probably correct me on this, what it's actually called, but there is those that are, I mean, there are those who are real artists, real people creating real songs, and they may use AI to help with some, auto-tuning type stuff. That's great. That's fine. It's just another tool for that, right? We've used technology for music for a long time. That's not what I'm talking about. There is now artists that their songs, the music style, everything is AI created, and their persona is AI.
Yeah.
And they have huge followers.
They have their own social media platforms.
And these are worship songs, by the way, or Christian music. It's not just, so this is what Relevant Magazine was just this last week posted it. Because you've got people who are basically going, oh my gosh, did you hear that song? That song's amazing.
Yeah.
The song was 100% all the lyrics, all the music to hear, all the instruments. It was all AI created, and the persona of the person.
Yeah.
The avatar of the musician themselves.
They don't exist.
They don't exist. 100% AI. And people are going, it's the best music. I mean, and it is good. I mean, if you're just listening to it, you're going, that's great music. And you wouldn't tell the difference. And I'm running to the chats because I got to figure this out, right? What people are saying. And in the chats, everybody's going, well, I couldn't even tell it was AI. Like, how do you know anymore?
I know.
And that's something that's just an everyday thing, like music, right? And so who knows where that could go from there.
And that's where you get into, this whole dump by the government on this UFO stuff, not to get on a whole other, because we do want to do a full.
Yeah, we got a whole, we're going to do a whole one on that one.
But how long before, and I've said this before, how long before video and audio evidence in a court of law is it admissible? Because you can make anything. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that we still have the ability right now
to
run it through systems to say that's AI.
That's going to change.
But when it comes to grainy footage of Bigfoot or a UFO, you know how easy that would be to make on AI? You make it grainy because it's always grainy. Every picture of Bigfoot is out of focus, and and UFOs and everything else. It's never clear 100%, but it's so easy to make that stuff. So that goes to, which we'll do an episode on. We've done it before. The truth. It's getting squishy because we don't know what it is. And, and then even the way, in part of one of my gigs I do, is, we do video content, and just with my partner, Nick, and I, we're going through what you can start to do with, he has.
Yeah. You showed me a video the other day.
Oh yeah.
Holy cow.
And Tyler Warren, who's a photographer, videographer, and everything else, he was showing us a whole nother level of AI where literally a lot of we do TV commercials and stuff in kind of in our little company, and we don't really need to leave the house anymore.
Right.
For a lot of
to
stuff.
Film it.
You can just make it.
You can create hosts.
Yes.
People.
Yeah, you can do
that
voice.
You wouldn't even know that this is a person that was totally created.
I know. And like Nick shoots a lot of real estate, so he shoots a lot of homes. You don't need anybody really necessarily to stage a home for photos. You just tell AI to do it.
Right.
And
it does do it.
You can't tell. And right now, most people ethically are still saying AI staged or whatever on photos for pictures. But man, and it's going so fast. And literally where it was 3 weeks ago or a month ago, we're in a whole new chapter. And it's now that's even going faster. But yeah, something crazy that we'll keep an eye on.
Well, you know, we were at our men's group on Wednesday nights this night, and then Craig brought up that he was just at a conference with his wife, and they were talking about Bible translation in AI. And I've heard the same thing. I was with translators, Wycliffe Bible translators. I was with some guys 3 years ago at a men's thing, and this was early on with AI. And they were saying even a few years ago that the known languages around the world, getting Bibles translated, right? It would take a translator maybe 3-4 years to learn the language and then break it down, translate the Bible. Now it's done in days, if not weeks at the longest. And it's clipping at a point now where he gave a projection from this conference he was at. They said, what was it? It was like
2033.
2033 that every language on the planet
was like
will have the Bible translated. It used to be 2050, right?
Yeah.
And now
it's probably going to go
even faster.
2030, 2028.
Yeah. So think about that. I mean, which we're like, yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's a good way that AI is translating the Bible into languages, that every known tribe will have a Bible translated for them here in the next, like within 7 years. And you go, whoa, wait a minute, which then raises a whole other question that we don't need to get into now, which is the end times thing around the gospel being preached to the whole nations and Jesus coming back. But that's for another time.
You know, it's amazing. And when you bring it up, and I'll bring it up with my wife, and she's like, I don't want to hear about, it's here and it's not going anywhere. This isn't one of those things that you can choose to consider or choose to pay attention to, because guess what? I mean, this just is what it is. Yeah. And for people and businesses and the creatives, you want to get on the front end of it and learn it. And then they throw their hands up and go, yeah, but the human element. I'm like, you better learn it and you better know it. And I don't know what it means. And I don't know what it means for job elimination and all that stuff. Because we were talking about a friend of ours who had a double bypass surgery this week. And, he got home last night. I went over and saw him. And he said the doctor was telling him it's not going to be too long before there's a robot that does that surgery.
Right. Yeah.
And most surgeries. And the robot doesn't get tired and doesn't need a bathroom break and doesn't need a coffee break. And you can just whip people through there. So in the medical field, I can't even imagine what we're going to be seeing, which then, for somebody who's starting one of 9 years of medical school, by the time you get out, are you going to be necessary? I don't know. I'm not saying you won't be, but the rate of change and the rate of development. And I don't know, man, I don't know where it's going. Scary, certainly, but it doesn't matter if it's scary. It's here, and it's not going anywhere.
It's not going to go anywhere.
Well, we were talking the other night. You mentioned our. Oh, by the way, before I could do this all day long. For those locally, in the Northwest, that we've talked about doing Cowboy Church. We did Canby Rodeo. We did High Desert Stampede. 4th of July, we are doing St. Paul Rodeo, and we're doing a Cowboy Church out of St. Paul.
That's right.
And we got it booked for the 3rd, July 3rd out there at the Bullpen. And shout out to the St. Paul JCs who've been great, and to everybody at the St. Paul Rodeo, who I know a lot of those people from being around. Wonderful event, wonderful rodeo, huge. And so anyway, we're going to be doing that on the 3rd.
The 3rd.
And we'll tell you more about it.
Yeah, we'll tell you more, but keep it on your calendar now. The 3rd at 9 a.m.
Right.
That's and Friday. This one's open to the public.
Yes.
So we're going to have, we want to invite everybody, come out, join us. We'll have a great time. We'll have live music. We'll have messages, and it'll be great. So come join us Friday morning, the 3rd.
Yes.
At 9 a.m.
Yes. Should be very cool. And it's just
4th of July weekend.
Yeah. It's something that's, it's,
say it that way. Right now we're just talking to each other, but start your 4th of July weekend with Cowboy Church. What a great way to start your whole weekend.
Should be great, and you will have a great message, I know. And I don't know who else we'll have there. We might have a couple other quick. And it's not, we're talking about an hour and a half, whatever. Just some fellowship, and should be a really cool time. But was talking the other night at our big Wednesday men's group, and a lot of the topics, I've mentioned this before. Not all of them, but some of them come because somebody brings something up, and I start thinking about it, And because I've brought up The Chosen before, some of the topics come from that. The one that somebody had brought up, they were talking about this, and I wanted to ask you about this, and I want to throw this out to people because I think it's a pretty amazing story in John. And it's one of those that, well, like everything, you dive into them and you start to realize what this means, what the teaching is. And I love that the Bible oftentimes throws something in the water and doesn't totally explain it and leaves it for not just for interpretation, but for further study. And it's timeless, as we know, as everything in the Bible is. So the story we were talking about in our group was the story from John 5, 1 through 15, where basically there, and I'll get into the story. A lot of people probably know it, but so basically what kind of in the scripture it says, and there was this feast at this time, there was this feast of the Jews, and Jesus went into Jerusalem, and there was by the sheep gate a pool. So in Aramaic, it was Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. So anyways, all this stuff from scripture. I don't have to go into all the detail. So by this pool, there were all of this multitude of invalids, blind, lame, paralyzed, and one man who he'd been laying there, a crippled guy, for 38 years. So when Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he'd been there a long time, he says to him, and this is a great scene in The Chosen, "Do you want to be healed?" And the sick man looks up at him, doesn't know who he is, says, "Sir, I have no one to put me in the pool when the water is stirred up." And I'll get to that in a second. "And while I'm going down, another steps in before me." And Jesus says to him, and this is in the scripture, the Chosen takes a few liberties here, but they go deeper into the story. Jesus says to him, "Get up, take your bed and walk." And at once the man was healed, took up his bed and walked. And so part 2 to the story is that day was the Sabbath. So after Jesus finds himself in the temple and says, he finds Jesus in there and says, "See, you're well. Sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you." And that opens a whole nother book of questions. So the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had healed him. So anyway, back to this pool. It was a place where all of these people gathered hoping for a miracle. And local tradition held that, and they even show a little scene of this on The Chosen, that an angel would occasionally stir the water, and the first person into the water after it was stirred would be healed. So this man, who'd been severely disabled for 38 years, longer than some lifetimes in that era, lying there waiting passively. I want to say patiently, but I'll say passively. So here's the interesting part of this, and there are many parts of this story that are really interesting. Jesus does not heal him unprompted like he has done so many times before. He stops and then asks the pointed question, "Do you want to be healed?" So on the surface, and this is the way I thought of it when I watched the episode, it's an absurd question. Almost insensitive question. Really. Who wouldn't want to be healed after laying nearly, 4 decades of helplessness? And the man, this is the other part, the man doesn't say yes, and he doesn't even acknowledge Jesus as a potential healer. Instead, the man, he offers an excuse. "I have no one to help me into the pool." He blames his situation on circumstances and other people. So you could argue then that he is stuck in this mindset of helplessness and superstition about the water rather than looking for the real hope that's standing right in front of him. So jump in.
No, I'm glad you brought this up, because this whole conversation around the mystery of healing and miracles and healing is a pretty fascinating conversation. We are deep into it as a household because of Burns, my wife's chronic illness, which is in the last few weeks has gotten worse. And so that's been a real pain in the butt, and has gotten me even at this point to be really frustrated with God. And I think they show that in The Chosen too, with little James, who comes back and it's like, hey, Jesus, what's up? I'm following you. I know you can do all these healings and miracles, and yet, what about me?
You've given me the power to heal, yet here I am in front of you, crippled.
Oh, I think this question around and the mystery of healing and miracles is very unsettling, particularly when you know and believe, you have a theology that God not just can, but he does do healing and miracles today, and that we're encouraged to seek miracles and healing. And yet then we don't see it. And you go, how do I wrestle with that tension? And there's layers. There's a bunch of layers that we can get into, which, by the way, the Pool of Siloam, I've been there.
Really?
I've stood there. Yeah, you can go there to this day in Jerusalem, Old Town Jerusalem, and stand there. And it's fascinating to sit. And the tradition was that, and again, this was kind of a folklore tradition, not really in Scripture, but they believed that an angel would come, stir the waters up, and like you said. But it's interesting that this particular guy, I think, he found his identity in being I don't want to say victim, but yes.
Yep.
And almost to the point where the self-pity, and I mean, if you think about it, you've been 40 years not healed. What else do you have to be identified by?
Right.
And I know this, that you talk with anybody that has a chronic illness, and they will tell you it's hard to not see your identity as that. Your sickness begins to become your brand that you wear, your identity. Not that you want that, it just can become that. And it's really hard at times. I know my wife, she struggles with that because every conversation that people have wants to fix her. And so then you become known. That's what you're known for. I'm known as the woman that's got the issue, right? Right. And it's all done with great. It's all done with actually really, really good. And some people are very helpful. So we're not saying don't do that. It's just, it becomes like the topic of every conversation. So then you go, well, every time somebody has a conversation with me, it's around that. And we're grateful for people wanting to help, and many have. So we're not saying don't do that, but you kind of go, well, there's more to me than that. There's other things I can offer. There's more to who I am. There's more conversations that I'd like to have that don't just center around my chronic thing that needs to be healing. So that's like a layer of identity stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so back to his question. So Jesus says, do you want to be healed? So if you go back to the Greek word for want,
what is it?
It's thelo or thalo. So so basically the definition of that word carries the sense of deliberate choice. Or firm decision, not just a casual wish.
Wow.
Which is kind of what we're talking about. So Jesus is essentially saying, are you willing to be healed?
Wow.
Do you desire, as you just said, the change that comes with that? And as you said, people, you grow accustomed to brokenness, and that can mean, as we're talking about here, physical, emotional, spiritual, that becomes part of their identity.
Yeah.
And healing would upend their routine, and it would force new responsibilities and letting go of excuses, if you want to put it that way.
Yeah.
And this man had survived, as you just said, by begging. And afterward, he would have to stand up on his own. So it confronts, really, resignation and self-reliance. And this man clearly had, as you can imagine, had given up on any real solution and was fixated on a flawed system, superstition, which was the pool. And Jesus forces him to face his own heart. Are you open to someone or something greater than what you've been waiting for? And what it gets down to again, and I know this is a big one for you because you've preached on this a lot, it highlights human inability. It highlights the fact that we can't heal ourselves.
Yeah.
And that the notion of self-help is a myth. And it points to the need of divine intervention. And so talk about that, because and before I get to the next little thought, layer of this thing. But you've mentioned this before, being at bookstores and seeing all these sections on self-help and what you find in these sections.
Well, okay, so here's where I think this really goes back to, because I get asked this question a lot, and again, especially because of our journey with my wife.
Yeah. And
what do you think, God? Do you guys believe in healing? I mean, we've done everything. we have done everything short of sin. What I mean by that is we don't go witch doctors, and sometimes people want you to go to new age stuff. And we're like, no, we're not. No, sorry, we're not inviting more demons into this. So, and it's interesting how many Christians are into certain, Eastern medicine, which I'm not saying all Eastern medicine necessarily is bad. I'm not saying that. We go to tons of naturopaths, and we've flown to other countries, and she's done so many different things. We've gone to every sozo, every prayer thing, we've done literally everything, and we'll keep doing. And we use natural doctors and everything.
In our last episode with Brian Stubbs, he talked about in Indonesia, they split your head, they cut your head open, and the witch doctor spits into your wound, and they seen that as some kind of healing.
Yeah. And that's the stuff that sometimes people, they're like, hey, have you tried this? Some of them sound like that.
Tried to get somebody to spit into a cut in her head?
Like, no, we're good. There's been a few suggestions for burn that we're like, we're good. We're not going that route. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to use, leeches now? I mean, it's like, we're not going that way. But I think one of the things that is really necessary in this conversation, and it'll answer what you just said about the self-healing, is we have to go back. This is what has helped us. So if you're listening, you have a chronic illness or someone in your family, we have to go back and go, what's the cause? And then what is actually true healing? And here's what I mean by that. If you go back and you go, why is it that someone even has pain to start with? So there's a number of reasons, but let me hit the top three. Number one reason why we have pain and suffering today is because we live in a broken, sinful world. Okay, that's a theological answer. Sin is like a cancer, not just in a disease, literal, but it is. Sin affects all creation, and so people are sick because we just live in a sick world because of sin, disease, trauma. So because you don't just have physical ailments, you have emotional healing, you have sexual healing, you have all of the types of traumas that can come in there are results of sin. And so that's layer number one, right? So before you can know what a cause is, you have to know before you know what the cure is, you have to know the cause, is what I'm trying to say. So what is the cause of our predicament of pain and suffering? So you got sin. And that's either disease or it's ramifications of other people's sin, i.e. trauma and so forth. Number two is sometimes, and I have to be careful when I say this, sometimes it's demonic. There are several times in the Bible where someone's lack of healing, their ailment is attached to something spiritual. And we have dear friends. I'll just say it this way. We're good friends. John Mark and Tammy Comer are good friends of ours. And if anybody knows John Mark Comer, of course, they know him because of his writings and teachings and all that. But many don't know his wife, Tammy. Well, we do. We're friends, and Bern and Tammy are friends. And Tammy has had complete really bad physical symptoms. Her and Bern would compare notes all the time, to the point where John Mark told me that I'm actually putting things in place to plan on being a widower. That's how far her health was going. And then she went and met a guy who does this is what it's called, deliverance freedom type ministry, prayed over her because there were some generational demonic things in her family line. And this guy prayed over it. The next day, totally healed. Totally healed from all her sickness. And now she does that kind of ministry. And now I have to be careful saying that.
Right.
Because then everybody goes, are you saying because I have all this stuff that I'm demon possessed or I got this demon? That's not what I'm saying. So I'm going to be really, really clear. I am just saying it's one of three reasons that people have things that need to be healed. One, it's sin that affects all of us, right? Number two, sometimes demonic things, and the enemy gets involved in that. The third one is our own sin. Our own sin. And I also have to put a disclaimer on that. But sometimes our sin, for instance, if I'm holding resentment and bitterness towards someone, the Bible is really clear that sometimes the sin that I have actually becomes toxic to my body. And so, and again, even spiritually, I can give the enemy a foothold into my life if I have unconfessed, unrepentant sin in my life. But again, my disclaimer, I have to say this as a pastor, because too many people have been hurt by their lack of healing because somebody got up and said, you don't have enough faith, you got sin in your life, or it's a demon, and now you've just mentally added on top of all the stuff that they were already feeling with not being healed. They're already feeling like, oh, God has abandoned me. Why has he not healed me, and so forth. And so now you're adding on top of that. So can it be? Yes. Is it always? No. So that's, I think, why we need to say that is for a reason. I mean, look at one of the best stories we read in the book of Acts is Peter and John are walking down a street, and there's a guy who's lame on the side of the road, and he's been that way, and he's begging for money. And somebody goes, oh, is this guy because of sin in his life?
Like, Jesus, what did he do to...
Exactly. Or sin of his parents. And they're like, no, this is for God's glory. Jesus, the glory of Jesus to be revealed in his life. You go, whoa, wait a minute.
Which is what he told little John.
Exactly. So then you go, wait a minute. So God allowed this guy's, it was because of not his specific sin. It wasn't because of his parents' sin. It was because of just sin in general that causes disease and deformities, things like that. So it wasn't like a shame thing, like, oh, this guy needs to do his penance. He needs to be an outcast because he's being punished for his sin. That's not what it was. And they heal him, get up and walk, is what Peter did. And then he goes and testifies to that, right? So that the glory of Jesus could be spread. So there was purpose in that. And that's a piece to where I'm going with this. So if we know what causes, then what's the cure? And this is where I think we really split hairs. What then is the definition of healing? Is our only definition of healing the removal of something that's painful, or something that is physically wrong being restored to what is physically right? If that's your only definition of healing, we have a very thin definition of healing. So we have to look at, you go into the Old Testament, and you've probably heard the word shalom.
Yep.
People say, hey, shalom, 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 you know. It means peace. Actually, it means more than that. The word shalom means to be whole. Whole. So you look at us as a person. I'm not just a physical being, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. That's what makes me who I am, right? True healing is wholeness. Sometimes, this is going to be hard for people, sometimes God will allow physical non-healing so that you can experience soul healing. God will sometimes allow pain and suffering in your life because he's doing a deeper work in you to bring you to spiritual wholeness, and it's up to him to decide that. And I think that's why when you look at the miracles of how Jesus healed, you just mentioned the guy by the pool. He's like, hey, get up and walk. And another time he's spitting in mud, rubbing it on some dude's eyes. And that was like, what? And then there was a time with the Roman soldier. The Roman soldier comes to Jesus and says, heal my child. And Jesus is like, well, what do you want me to do? And the Roman soldier says, hey, I'm a soldier. I give my soldiers, I'm a commander. I tell them what to do. They do it. He goes, you can just give the word. And Jesus goes, there's no one that has faith like this guy.
That's a great scene too.
Oh, it's in the Chosen's
because
awesome.
Gaius the whole time is just, he calls him street creature early on and doesn't want him around, and then toward the end he accepts, and that's a powerful scene in the Chosen when Gaius comes and calls Jesus Lord, and all of the disciples are like, "You're calling him Lord? This guy who has persecuted us?"
Yeah,
but he comes to believe, and then, as you said, Jesus says to him, "Man, I've never encountered this kind of faith."
Totally. So I think Jesus purposely did not heal every person the same way because we would turn it into a formula. Yeah. We would be like, oh, this is what healing is. Because then what we would do is we wouldn't need the healer anymore. We would just need the formula from the healer. And I heard someone say to my wife years ago, do you want the healer more than you want the healing? Meaning, do you want to have a deeper relationship with Jesus? And it could be possible that going through your physical brokenness is creating a deeper relationship with God. Therefore, the healing you're experiencing in your life right now isn't physical, but your soul and your spirit is becoming more whole, more healed, because you're walking deeper with Jesus. And
Not just for her, but for you.
Oh my gosh, we haven't even got to that part. And that's why, to circle back to you, we can't heal ourselves because I can't make myself whole. Not just physically. That's what the whole demonic thing about self-transformation, self-help and all that. We can't heal ourselves. God heals us. But sometimes the healing he wants to do is deeper. It's spiritual. He wants to heal your identity. He wants to heal other areas of your inner life. And sometimes the tool or the way that he is getting there is he's allowing you to not be physically healed. So the reason I say that is because I want to honor people who are listening. I want to go the opposite direction because you already feel guilty. You take our marriage. Man, that's like, what am I learning through her non-healing? And I don't even want to say non-healing because, again, if we redefine healing, she's experiencing wholeness in ways that I don't have, and I don't have her physical symptoms. So now we're just opening a whole different way of seeing healing, and I think we have to have this conversation. If we only talk about physical healing, we miss. And then what happens is some people may go, I'm holding out, which I do believe. We believe in physical healing. We will always pray for it. We will always seek it. We'll go to every doctor. We're never going to give up on physical healing. But it's like blinders. It's like a horse that's got blinders that if that's your only definition of healing, God might be doing something incredible in your life right now, but you're missing it. So I want to help people. This is what I want to help people see a bigger definition of healing, because you might see something God's doing in your life right now, not by your choice. I understand that. Of course, you want to be totally free of pain and sickness. I get that. And that's a good desire. Don't lose that. Don't feel guilty about that. I just want to help you maybe see some blind spots that God could be doing something beautiful and powerful and a different kind of healing in your life. That's all.
And in the lives of those around you.
That's it.
Which is what basically he told little John. He said, could I heal you? Sure, I could heal you, but imagine the stories you can tell if I don't. So basically telling him, I'm going to, we all say, and I pray this too, Lord, use me. We all say that. I mean, we should.
Right.
And we get to the point where just use me for your kingdom. Okay. Well, are you
Here's
sure?
how.
Because this is maybe how I'm going to use you.
I know.
And then, but you can see how people back then got to this point, because Jesus, when he finds him in the temple, the man he had just healed, he says to him, see, you're well, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. So that leads people, you can see, to say, what did you do? What did you do to bring this on?
Yeah.
Therefore, can we just fix it on our own? Because if you're doing something, maybe just change that sin and maybe you'll get healed.
Yeah.
It's a weird thing, and I understand why it probably is frustrating for people, or they don't understand that part of it.
Yeah.
But he does say that.
Yeah.
Whereas you talked about in Acts, another question about seeing somebody who's needing healing, and the disciples say, wonder what this guy did.
Yeah.
What was your sin?
Yeah.
That put you in this position?
Absolutely.
Ooh, that's a scary place to go to.
And Jesus would oftentimes, I think of not a healing situation, but a freedom session he did with the woman caught in adultery.
Yeah.
And it was a great moment where, she's accused and they bring her out and they're getting ready to, kill her. And they put Jesus on the spot. It was all set up. This was all to try to set Jesus up to get him. And he writes in the sand, and they all leave, and he looks at her after he protected her from them. So he had her back, and then he says, go and sin no more. And so you do see that Jesus, and that wasn't a healing situation, but I wonder though if it was. Again, when we use our broader definition of healing, I wonder if, the woman at the well, I think if that was a healing session. You're like, wait, she didn't have any physical ailment. No, but could you imagine emotionally what that woman went through?
Yeah.
She was known with a bad reputation, whether that was self-induced or she was a victim being exploited. Point of it being she was an outcast. And then she has this encounter with Jesus. And it wasn't physical healing, but he touched her in a way that healed her inner. She had inner healing, new life. She goes back to the community that rejected her, and then they now believe.
And he chose her for that. And if she hadn't had the 5 husbands or whatever, she wouldn't have been at the well in the middle of the day. Right. And she wouldn't have had the run-in with Jesus. That's the whole other slippery part where you go, she wouldn't have been there at that time if things hadn't happened like that for her, which is a whole nother, there's so many branches off of this story.
Well, we have well, you do. I know of her, a woman from West Lynn.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I mean, her story is, it's gut wrenching. And I think, are you guys are friends?
Yeah. My wife is,
And,
it's
a tragic story.
Yeah.
And what she's gone through, but her reputation, she can't leave the house because of just the sensitivities and she was exposed to some radiation accident that happened, I think in the gym, correct?
Yes.
And so I just feel so bad for her, right? And I don't know if she's even listening. I think you might be.
She does listen.
And if you are listening, I want you to know your reputation. I would love to meet you because I've only heard you by other friends and maybe even be a guest on here because your testimony has brought so much hope. I hope you're listening.
She is.
Okay. Because I didn't know if I want to bring your name up. I want to honor her. So that's why I'm keeping her name private because I haven't asked her to bring her name up. But I'm just going to say, if you are listening, which you are, just so you know, you are touching so many lives.
Yes.
Because in her pain, she has been a vessel of hope and light and strength and courage. She intercedes. I have had so many people I know as a pastor that have been ministered to by her.
Yes.
And
she doesn't even know it.
She doesn't even know it. And I want to elevate her and honor her because in her pain and trauma, she is changing eternity and bringing so much hope to so many people's lives. And so I think that becomes an example of course, Paul, who prayed for his thorn to be taken away, right? And I think in that circumstance, he prayed and prayed. Who doesn't? The prayer is great. Don't give up on that. And yet the Lord's response to him was, no, I'm not going to remove that pain from your life. I'm not going to remove that, whatever it might be, an ailment. It's certainly an affliction. And the Lord says, but my power will be made known in your weakness, and you will experience a great amount of my grace. My grace and power is going to be poured out on you. So, man, it's powerful to see God work through broken vessels.
Mm. And, when we talk about this guy and some further stuff that we take from this story, the question of, do you want to be healed? It cuts through the surface level complaints kind of to the issue of, and I kind of said this a minute ago, but do you actually want the transformation I'm offering, or are you comfortable where you are?
Wow.
And that's the question that I get, or the thing that I've kind of said to people, and therefore, and another part of this, which is a whole nother thing, and we talk about people examining their own hearts honestly, and Jesus is asking you in areas of your life that you feel paralyzed, and he's asking you, do you really want to be healed?
Wow.
Because sometimes we say we do.
Yeah.
But we cling, as you said a minute ago, even about when you were talking about your wife, we cling to the familiarity of our pain. And for some people, and this is where I think about a guy I was around, Kevin Dahlgren, who Kevin is a massive homeless advocate and outreach and a huge social media following. And I got to walk with him one day in downtown Portland. He talked, and I was asking him questions about certain people, and he said, that person right there, they have an apartment, but they choose to be down here on the street.
Yeah.
It becomes, as you said, it becomes their identity, and they would rather be there. And not only do we cling to the familiarity of our pain and the attention it brings and the excuse it allows. So healing, in many cases, and this, I'm not being flippant about this, it demands action and obedience, like the man picking up his mat and walking, and a willingness to change. And I'm not talking about people who are maybe suffering, as you just talked about a second ago, but this is more of a general question, and that's why I brought up the homeless thing. And I know it's not a blanket. I understand.
Sure. But I think there's a piece, right? We're unpacking a very multifaceted conversation. Yeah. So here's a piece or a layer that I do think is important. We used to do when we were church planting downtown Portland.
I was going to ask you to tell this story. Last night I thought about it because it fits perfect. I know where you're going. You said 3 words and I know where you're going. So tell this story because it sticks with me.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the guy that was busting into our house. Yes. Yeah. So we were planting a church in downtown Portland, and we love that. We love working with the homeless and helping them, the addicts, getting recovery. I mean, we're all big fans of that. We still do that work, even with our church now, City Team and Portland Rescue Mission, Union Gospel Mission, great organizations. Here's my point. We had a guy that got him off the street, started serving in our church. He was oh my gosh.
Wasn't he on the worship team?
Oh, yeah. He was a great musician. So gets his life clean. We put him on the worship team. He's involved in everything. He's doing phenomenal. One day, we're in our house, and it's about 3 a.m. Bam, 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 bam. Somebody's yelling, screaming, trying to bust our door down. I wake up going, holy cow. Somebody's literally screaming their head off. And I grabbed, something. Something to defend myself. So I grabbed a chair.
Oh, that's good.
And an iron. I was like a lion tamer. And I'm like,
a whip?
Yeah, a whip. And I was like, whatever was sitting right next to me. I'm like, this guy's coming through the door in about 2 seconds. And anyway, so he didn't, but he's pounding. I reinforced the door and I call the cops. I'm like, hey, we got a guy. This guy's nuts. He's gonna break into our house. The cops show up, and when I hear them arrest him, I open the door. That's the guy that was on our worship, the guy in recovery. And he had relapsed. And this was probably his 6th time relapsing. And I remember sitting with him, and after he got sober, of course, he felt horrible. He was high on meth, and people don't know this, but when you're high on meth, you are dangerous. You can actually, one of my mentors was shot and killed by his son, who was high on meth and didn't know what he did the next day. Shot his dad in the door of the house because he was high on meth. So a couple days later, I visit him and check in on how he's doing. He felt bad, didn't remember anything. And this is what he told me. He said, if I'm clean and sober, I have more responsibilities now. And the weight of responsibilities is too much. It's easier for me to go back to my old life. And so and again, that's not for everybody, but I think that there is a responsibility in that particular type of situation. I don't know this, when I think about this story, here's a guy that sat by that pool for pretty much his whole life, right? Almost 4 decades. What would you do if all of a sudden the next day you're not just healed, but now you need to contribute? Like,
healing demands action.
It does. Like, there's a sense of, okay, I've been receiving aid or charity or whatever because he's alive, so somebody had to bring him food, somebody had to do things for him, and he was receiving that his whole life. And now it's like, hey, if your identity is in that as a victim and your identity is in just receiving, being whole physically now requires, in his particular situation, it would require, okay, now you've got to contribute to society. There's things you got to do. And I wonder if that's do you want to be healed? Because on the other side of the healing, is there a life that maybe, you know what, I'll just stay where I'm at. I'm talking about this situation.
Right. Well, and another thing about that is in the question, which is what we're kind of talking about, do you want to be healed? It also says Jesus respects your free will. He's not going to force it.
Yeah.
And rather than in this case, now there were cases where he did, as we said, he just healed, without asking the question. So why this time? Why this time the question? Yeah. And I do think it's an example of free will. And we've talked about free will before. I think we did a whole episode on it. And I've always thought about free will in the way that without free will, there can be no true love because you're not making a choice. He gives the guy a choice.
Oh, he does.
Which is so powerful.
Which is so fascinating. Because, I think of Burn again, just to come back to that, our thing. I know Burn right now after we were just having a meeting with another couple in our church, just talking about this. She's been chronically ill for 26 of our 31 years of marriage. And it's not just the physical pain that she struggles with every day. And this is what people don't know. When you have a chronic illness, the thing you struggle with the most is obviously the disappointment not being healed. Of course. Sometimes the questions of why God, that's absolutely part of that. One of the things you feel is a deep sense of grief.
Yeah.
You grieve normalcy. And you look at everybody else's normal that you don't have, and you go, gosh, I would love to be able to just do this, or this, because other people get to. And of course, other people have their things, but you begin to go down the road. And then sometimes you feel guilty because you go, oh, my life is now inconveniencing others. And so then you're guilty for something that you shouldn't be guilty about, but That's all wrapped up. So when you talk about healing, there's layers to healing than just, so like if someone was to go to Bern right now and say, hey, Bern, do you want to be healed? She would say, of course. Like, I would love to not have my identity in this. I would love to be totally healed, but it wouldn't just be physical healing. It would be healing in other ways that has been compounded because of what the chronic pain has created. So she would say, yeah, please heal me physically. Oh yeah. Can we also heal my grief? Can we also heal my guilt? Can we also heal, the other things in it? Can we also heal the disappointments? Can we also heal, all those things? Because it wouldn't just be about the physical healing. Like, yes, please that, of course. Like, that's never going to be a no, but it's more deeper than I think people realize.
And back to the free will part of it, the question that he asks the man, it gives the man, if you want to say it this way, it gives the man agency.
Ooh, yeah, totally.
So after years of powerlessness,
yeah,
Jesus treats the guy as someone capable of choosing and responding, and not just as a passive sufferer.
Right.
Which I think is one of the most powerful parts of the story, because we talk about the sick role gets really comfortable.
Yeah.
Especially for this guy, it certainly seemed to. And then the other great part of it after that is, and we just talked about this, the story ends, and this is one of those that we don't know what happens after this, but we know that the man's story ends with him identifying Jesus to the religious leaders, and it sparked opposition, by the way, but it was his part in the act.
Yeah.
It was his part in the play.
Yep.
Where, it was his role.
Yeah.
And but real healing, as you just talked about, it can disrupt the status quo. And it does that in this case because it sparks the opposition and invites new challenges. But obviously in this case, not only was it a key role for him, and he ends up in the Bible, and we're talking about him right now, but so worth it.
Yeah.
And all because the uniqueness of this scenario where he literally respects his free will and asks the question. And that's why we're sitting here talking about it.
Yeah, because, part of this is the agency thing is fascinating to think about because, God, if he wanted to, he could just speak right now. He could. He speaks life into existence. He created life by speaking into existence. He could, if he wanted to right now, heal every person on the planet. Every hospital could be emptied in about 2 seconds, right? No more sickness, no more death, none of that. And we have to talk about this too, is there is what we call the now, not yet. And what we mean by that is there will be a time in the future. There's this promise that everyone who loves you, or I should say, so anyone who believes in Jesus, let me put it that way. Anyone who believes in Jesus will be healed. That's a future glory, new heaven, new earth. There's no more tears. There's no more sickness. There's all that kind of stuff. It's amazing. We all long for that, right? Well, today we're not there, so we get glimpses. And so in the glimpses, God has a mysterious prerogative to do his will. So when we read that verse, that really frustrates a lot of people. He works all things for the good of those who love him. And that gets used and abused so many times. But I have to use the same thing with healing there. What's the definition of good? If good is just me having no more trials and hardships and, issues. If that's my definition of good and I insert it into that verse, then I go, God, how is this good? Because it's not good. People being sick, car accidents, people dying. This isn't good. So how are all things working for good of those that love you? Well, but if you define good in the same way we had to redefine healing, good is me becoming like Christ. Good is Christ living in me. Good is deeper fellowship with Jesus. If that's good, then even the hard things work towards that good. Then he puts a different purpose on the pain. He puts a different perspective on the pain because we're redefining good. I think that's where you have to redefine healing. You have to redefine good. And then you go, he is working towards healing and he is working towards good, but it goes way beyond our definitions of those things. So agency, I think agency, this is personally me, agency is where he says, I want you to partner with me in your healing. I want you to partner with me in the process of your transformation, restoration. I want you to partner with me. So I think that's what we see in there when he looks at the guy and goes, hey, do you want to be a part of this? It's like, hey, I want you to partner. God invites us to partner. I think one of the most powerful things we could ever say is, am I willing to partner with the pain in my life? Because if God's using sickness, trauma, pain, things that he doesn't create, he's not the author of that, but he allowed that. And he allows that to accomplish his greater healing or his greater purpose, his greater good. The agency question gets resolved in him saying, it's an invitation. Will you partner with me in what I want to do to bring healing and good in your life? And you can say yes, or you can say no. And I think that's where the agency, and I think that's where it comes with this Ken.
And it's, in this particular case, and not everybody who's, I don't want to blanket it, but it's a gut check prayer where, Lord, do I want the freedom and wholeness you offer, even if it means leaving my old ways behind?
Yeah.
And it's an invitation, in this case especially, and again, not everybody's, to stop making excuses and say yes to the one who can make us whole. And I'm not saying that to the people that you have talked to who are, long debilitating sickness. I'm saying it as it relates to the story. That I think is part of the lesson in this, that do I truly want the freedom? And then a whole nother part of it is what we've done an episode on before. Do I feel worthy to receive it? Because that's what I hear. I know.
I'm glad you brought that one up.
Well, and I brought it up because that's what I hear. And that's what I hear a lot of times, even in men's groups and talking to my group on Wednesday night. I have a question that comes up all the time, and with me too. My gosh, with me is, am I worthy to partner with you? Am I worthy to receive that? And I know I'm given the choice. I know I'm given the free will. This story demonstrates that. Am I willing, or do I feel like I'm? The story of Gaius, you talked about a minute ago. That's what he says. Lord, I'm not worthy to have you come into my home. Yep. The best part of that scene on The Chosen, when I've watched it 1,000 times. The most powerful part of that is when he says, when Gaius is explaining this, and he says, I'm a Roman. You're not going to feel comfortable in my home. I'm not worthy to have you. You can heal from a distance. And he goes on and on and on and says few more lines. And the one thing Jesus says in there is not worthy. So in all that he said in the next 5 sentences in explaining and giving excuses, the one thing that stuck with Jesus that perplexed him is when he said, not worthy. Like that's the one thing that disappointed him and surprised him. And that is powerful to me because for me, especially in my personality, I watched that scene for that line, for him to, of all the things he said, that's what stuck with Jesus. He said, not worthy. I mean, but that's a big deal. And for a lot of men, especially women too, but for the men that I deal with and we interact with, and for me too, that part of it, when you say, and all these things we said, and the free will we were given, and the chance and the opportunity we were given by him, am I worthy to receive that? I know that's tough for a lot of men, and I hear them say that.
In the thing, we didn't even get into this because maybe for another podcast, but I'm going to go bounce off that real quick, is Paul says, crucify the flesh, crucify the flesh, crucify the flesh. And the flesh part of us is we have a battle of two natures, right? We have the sin nature, which is our flesh, and then we have the Holy Spirit, the new nature. And Scripture says that through his promises, we become partakers of the divine nature. So we have a battle between flesh and spirit, okay? And the spirit wants what God wants, but our flesh wants the opposite of that. And oftentimes it's our physical flesh that is our worst enemy. So when Paul says crucify the flesh, that's things like when we do fasting, for instance. You know, when someone fasts, what are you doing? You're depriving yourself of physical food so you can feast on spiritual food, right? So in that process, you're telling the flesh, you're not the master over me anymore. The spirit is. Sometimes God's allowing the pain and suffering because he's allowing that to crucify our flesh so that our spirit can grow and deeper walk with him. Again, this comes back to what is true healing and freedom and wholeness is to be free from sin. Well, sometimes it's called sanctification is the theological word, becoming more like Christ, more holy. Sometimes my flesh gets in the way. And so the physical trauma and pain we go through can be a part of God's bigger purpose and healing process to teach us to be more dependent on him, to lean more into his power, to lean more into his presence. And so in that process of that, we are being healed in a different way. And also our flesh is being crucified. Therefore, the Spirit of God that we have in us controls us more. We become more spiritual is what I'm saying. And because we become more spiritual, that's the definition of wholeness. So that's a interesting things. That's why Paul says when he talks about sufferings, he's like, no, I embrace this because it's part of me crucifying the flesh and identifying with the suffering of Christ on the cross and his sufferings. And we know what his suffering did. His suffering brought freedom and healing and deliverance. And so that's why Paul says, if my suffering in my body, I'm going to partner with that. So it crucifies my flesh so that God's greater healing and purpose can happen in me. He can resurrect something new in my flesh dying. That's the spiritual depth of this. And the other thing I would say, too, that I think is really important for people listening, that comes back to something you said earlier, is I get asked all the time, why does God heal this person, not heal this person? And we talk a lot about trusting God with our sickness, health, trauma. Let me spin it for a second. What if it's not just I need to trust God with this, trust that he's doing something, trust that he has a purpose in it? What if God is looking at you who has not been healed physically yet, and he's saying, I can trust you with this?
I prayed that over a guy one time who was going through a problem. It wasn't a physical problem. It was business-wise. And I don't know where it came from, and I'm not trying to say it was some deep thing. I just said, the Lord must think a lot of you to give you this.
That's it. And somebody go, Mike, show me that in the Bible. Job. Satan comes and accuses Job, and actually it was the Lord that said, have you considered my servant Job? All right, thanks, Lord.
Yeah, Lord's like, no.
No, I thought you had my back.
Not me.
Not me. And so the Lord, because Job was trying to make a case for someone that the human race will only love God if they're blessed.
If everything's going great.
Yeah, everything's going great. And God says, this is what he literally was saying, I trust my servant Job. He may not handle it perfectly, but I know the outcome of this is going to go where it needs to go. I can trust him that he can endure this. And this is what happened with Job, was the affliction came, both the affliction, infliction, all of that happened. And it was horrible. You get to the very end, and Job says that I don't have a faith in God anymore based on hearsay and rumors that he's good. I've tasted it myself. Job had to go through to say, I can speak firsthand of God's power. I can speak firsthand of his strength and his hope, because I was in the worst of it, in the affliction. And the Lord said, and that's why Job is our story today that has brought hope to so many people, because the Lord said, I can trust my servant Job. So if you're someone that's going through hard things, what if it's not, you aren't healed because you don't trust God? What if you're not healed because he trusts you? To carry the tension of, I'm not healed, but I'm going to praise him. I'm not healed, but I'm still going to serve him. I'm not healed, but I'm going to live for him. And so in other words, I would speak honor over you, that you might have a faith that's actually greater, not less.
And unlike the man at the pool, Job didn't get the option.
Yeah, that's true.
He didn't get the question.
Right.
And it's funny, you spent, lastly, you talked about wholeness a lot. And it's interesting that in the line that we have, made this podcast about, do you want to be healed? In some translations, it is, do you want to get well? Or in the other translation, will thou be made whole?
Ooh.
That's another translation of that
good.
question.
I like that. Yeah.
Which goes to what you already talked about, the wholeness part of it, which I didn't really think about when we started down this road.
But at the end of the day, I'll always say this, we always pursue healing. Like, we'll never give up on that. And I'm talking about all layers of healing, physical healing. Because I do know that sometimes even Bern gets to the point where she's like, well, I guess I should just give up because this is my purpose in life that God has given to me, right? And so I guess I just have to embrace I'm never going to be healed physically. I'm like, no, I don't think that's anywhere. I mean, unless God shows up in a vision and tells you that, it's good. It's a good desire to always say, God, I'm going to believe that you can heal me. So keep pursuing that, but you have to trust the mystery of that with him. And when, how, why, there will be a day when there won't just be spiritual healing, there will be complete healing, complete wholeness. And so that's the now and not yet stuff.
Okay. Well, I was going to wrap up, and now you just prompted another question real fast. So when somebody says then, well, give that to God, just give it to the Lord. Mm-hmm. That sounds like then you're asking somebody to be passive.
You're right.
But you said the power of seeking healing.
Yeah.
That those two kind of contradict a tiny bit in my understanding.
They do. Because I think what you have to do on one hand is you have to trust God with the outcome. But on the other hand, you have to not give up on the hope of it. And I think that's really the tension of prayer oftentimes. That's not only what prayer is. Prayer is deep fellowship with God. That's the main definition of prayer. Talking with God, walking with God, experiencing his presence. But I think part of the tension of prayer is, well, a perfect example is Jesus in the garden, who's going through and he's like, Lord, take this away.
Yeah.
Take this away.
Let this cup pass.
Take this away. Like he's literally asking for deliverance from the angst of the pain and the anxiety that he was feeling for that, right? Lord, take it, but your will be done, not mine. And I think that encapsulates a perfect prayer for someone. Lord, please take this away. Lord, please take this away, but your will be done.
Beautiful. We appreciate all of you for spending time with us, as you know, and we love you, and we will see you on the next episode of Vertical Pursuit. We invite you to subscribe to our podcast, comment, or message us, and check out our website at verticalpursuit.org. Download the VP app and check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.